Hey everyone, welcome. This is Give Live. This is where we talk all about GiveWP and all of the success you can have with online fundraising. And we do this occasionally. I'd like to do it a lot more. So if you're enjoying it, definitely give us a thumbs up, let us know. And we have some live attendees here on our webinar. Thanks for being here, everybody. And today we have a special subject. We're going to be talking about Airtable and how you can use it as a donor management system. And we brought on a special guest today named Jonathan Scheiman, and he's going to introduce himself. Jonathan, how are you doing? And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I am doing great, especially now that I'm here on the live stream. Very exciting. I've been using Give for a long time, so this is really a lot of fun for me. So basically, to introduce myself, I would say that there are a lot of nonprofits out there who have donation pages, but those donation pages might not be converting all that well, meaning for every 100 people, they might only be getting 1 or 2 donations who come to that page. And there might be some nonprofits out there who don't even know. They're not measuring that. They don't know how to measure it. They don't see the importance of measuring it. And that's really a lost opportunity, because when you're able to look at your data and your analytics and things like A/B testing and segmentation, there's just such a unbelievable opportunity to increase the donations, increase the average donation, increase the amount of recurring donations that your nonprofit is getting. So that's where I come in. I work with nonprofits and for-profits, but today we're talking about nonprofits. And I really help them tell their story on their donation page, their homepage, whatever, to really focus on helping inspire people to donate more, to become recurring donors. Recently, I had a client who was getting that 1% conversion rate. For every 100 people who came to their donation page, they got about 1 donor. And I met with people at the organization. I learned about the causes that they were fundraising for. We rebuilt their page, we rebuilt their funnel, we rebuilt a lot of their email marketings, and they went from 1 out of 100 to 7 out of 100.
Awesome.
So that's 7 times the amount of donations. So that's what I do. And the great thing is, if you're wondering, wow, how could I get some of that goodness? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about in the webinar today.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much again for being here, Jonathan. We're going to jump into things. To all the webinar attendees, there is a Zoom chat panel there where you can introduce yourself, say hi, and let everybody know what you do and where you're from. And also, if you have questions throughout any of this that we're going over, type them into that chat, and Jonathan and I will be watching for that, and we'll be able to address those as we start talking through things. Just as a quick kind of like highlight overview, we're going to first introduce, of course, what Airtable is and why you should be using it. We're going to talk a little bit about how you actually get your GiveWP data into Airtable, because you can't use it unless the data is in there, of course. And then we're going to highlight the different views and charts that Airtable has, and how those can really give you a lot of insight. And we're going to talk about how you can correlate other activity on your website that's outside of GiveWP, how you can correlate that with your donation information within Airtable as well. And then we'll wrap up by talking about this really interesting approach that Jonathan has on how he's doing donor follow-ups through Airtable as well. So that's essentially how we're laying it out. And then we'll get going here. So we have already a couple folks chiming in. Looks good. Nice. David from the UK, glad you're here. Cool. Keep chatting it up and we'll get going. So Jonathan, first and foremost, we want to talk about Airtable. Not everyone is familiar with Airtable. It's a really powerful tool, and a lot of folks probably use it in different ways. Using it as a donor management tool, I think, is really fascinating and interesting. So can you give us kind of like the overview of what Airtable is and what it does and why people should be using it with GiveWP?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think I'll start sharing my screen so people can see a little bit about what I'm talking about. That sounds good? Okay. All right, share screen and screen 3. So if anyone is still going to be looking at my face instead of the screen share, you're going to see I'm looking sideways. It's because my camera's on one thing, but the Airtable's on another. So everyone can, or Matt, you can see my Airtable base here.
Yep. Yep. Looks
Okay,
good.
awesome. So many of you might be familiar with Excel or with Google Sheets, and Airtable is kind of like spreadsheets on steroids. So the way that Airtable works is that you create multiple spreadsheets and you can link them together. And we're gonna talk about what that means and how that works, especially with donations. But the whole point of the whole point of Airtable and the beauty of Airtable is they say like organize anything, and that's exactly what it is. So the concept here is that there's many tabs, and in Airtable world these tabs are called tables, and each one of them represents a different type of data, a different data point. So you have donations and you have donors, right? So those two things are not the same. A donation is a $10 donation or whatever it is. A donor is a person who can have multiple donations. So those are two different types of data, but they're obviously very linked to each other. And what Airtable is it's this unbelievable system where you can have these different types of data all linked to each other, and it has automatic built-in calculations, formulas, filters, and all types of ways to make it to take a real deep dive into your data to make actionable decisions about how to continue fundraising and fundraise more effective. And honestly, it's like so cool. It really becomes very fun and easy to use. So,
One thing that
so
I've always really enjoyed about it is that, like, I do a lot of work in Google Sheets, for example, but this is very more intuitive in some ways and more powerful because the formulas that I always take forever to figure out in Google Sheets, they kind of have a lot of that more automated for you. Like you're able to choose from a lot of preset formulas to be able to set the whole column in a certain way. Has that been your experience as well?
yeah, that's exactly it. When I got more into digital fundraising, one of the people at the company that I worked for actually recommended that I take some courses in Google Sheets and Excel and stuff like that. And I never really got around to it. And then one day I stumbled upon Airtable, and within like just a week or so, I kind of never needed that again because it has some of these great calculations and formulas and filters and groups and all that type of stuff built in.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. So why would folks in general, why do you want to use Airtable specifically with GiveWP?
So that's a great question, and there's really a lot of reasons, but I'm going to try to focus on the most important ones. And I would say it breaks down at least what we're going to be presenting today into two main things. Number one is to be able to look at certain types of data that are not natively in GiveWP. So the reporting tab in GiveWP is amazing, and it's been heavily updated recently. So it was good before, and now it's great. But depending on what you're looking for, it kind of has a specific couple of tables and charts pre-built, and if you need something more customized, you might be able to get parts of it. You might be out of luck. You might have to use, start creating sheets and stuff like that. So Airtable has a lot more features and abilities to do different types of filtering and groups and calculations. So like, for example, let's say recently a lot of people have been fundraising specifically for coronavirus causes. So they might want to take a deep dive on their coronavirus form. Let's say they made a new form for coronavirus, and they want to check how many recurring versus not recurring. And let's say we took our recurring and we multiplied it by 12 because the typical recurring donor stays for about a year, and then I want to look at the difference between recurring and not recurring. So even though some of those donations haven't happened yet. So GiveWP is amazing, but it's not always going to give you exactly the type of data you're looking for if you're looking for
Hmm.
something super specific, super calculated based on different ways of calculating things.
Yeah.
You know, another thing which a lot of nonprofits do, and one of the most successful ways to fundraise is by newsletters and by solicitation emails and stuff like that.
Mm.
So unless you created like a new, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but unless you created a new form for every single newsletter, which is quite tedious, you might not know which newsletters have done better than others, and trying to look for trends or certain topics that did not convert very well. So you could get pretty sometimes a lot of data out of Google Analytics if you're good at Google Analytics. But again, you could actually pull out more into Airtable because you can create things like expected donations based on recurring
Yeah.
or see. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's
there's
oh
definitely ways that you can, like if you're pushing, if you have several different campaigns that are all going to the same exact form, understanding the performance of each of those campaigns to the same form, that can definitely be tricky with our default reports. So that is a benefit I see here, as long as you can get that campaign data into Airtable, which I know that you've done that. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next step. But that's a good example, because a lot of folks do kind of prefer to have fewer forms, even though we, generally speaking, we try to think of forms as campaigns, like that each campaign that you might run would have its own form. But if you're, like you just said, if you have multiple campaigns all going to the same form, that's when some of that data might get a little bit tricky.
hmm Yeah, and we I could go on about that. But what
Mhm.
the other thing that is really great in Airtable, or really a lot of CRMs, not specifically Airtable, is you can look at a lot of data outside of GiveWP and how
Right.
that's intertwined. So
Yep.
most people have opt-ins on their website where people can become subscribers. So we're going to go through a formula and an example of how you can see how long it took someone to become from, on average, from subscriber to a donor, which is
Yeah.
an extremely important metric
Yep.
when you're trying to onboard people successfully and stuff like that.
Yep.
So the ability to take non-give WP data and intertwine it into your donation data.
Yeah. The other thing I always find about a tool like Airtable is, and I'm sure you find this with your clients, is that every cause is different and has unique needs. And with a WordPress plugin like GiveWP or WooCommerce or anything, what we're trying to do is provide basically a singular solution for as many people as possible. And GiveWP is very, very, very flexible, of course, but being able to bring all of that data into Airtable and then customize it to whatever you want to be able to do, I think that's a really big strength of it as well, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always blown away by the capability of Give, especially if you get creative when you can mix different forms together and some of the short codes that have some customization. So we've been able to do some amazing, amazing stuff with Give WP,
That's great to
so
hear.
that you would never be able to do with Airtable alone. So yeah, we're here. Here, Airtable is kind of icing on the cake in terms of reporting.
Excellent. Well, let's get a little bit into how we get that data into Airtable, because that is definitely, I think, a big question in a lot of folks' minds. Of course, the really, really simple answer is Zapier, which we recommend for a lot of different purposes. But why don't you walk through a little bit of how you're getting this data into Airtable from GiveWP?
Right. So Zapier for sure would be the easiest way. Airtable has an API. I know Give has an API, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yes.
It's yeah. But like Matt said, there's really no reason to build a custom integration here. So I set up a Zap as a demo, and then right before I renamed my Airtable base to demo for GiveWP, and I think that broke my Zap, unfortunately. But for people who are familiar with Zapier, and even if you're not, for anyone who doesn't even know what Zapier is, it's basically an amazing tool for taking data, information, actions, really anything from one tool and putting it into another. So really everything we're going to show you is basically done with one Zap. Every time a new donation comes in, so new donation and Give, it needs to create a record, and a record is a row, right? So here we have like record number one, and there's a lot of columns to it. But every time a donation comes in, it has a donation ID number. This donor ID would correlate to a human being. And for privacy reasons, I just gave them numbers because
Yep.
these are actually real donations. The amount of the donation here, this is not inside Zapier. This is a formula. This says if the subscription is a monthly subscription, then take my donation and multiply it by 12. So for this nonprofit, their average donation monthly donor lasts about a year. So you can see, oh, this donation, it looks like it's $90, but really it's $1,080.
Mm-hmm.
The donation date, this is whether it was monthly or one time. Most of that data comes in through Zapier, besides for that projected totals. Here's another one that doesn't come in through Zapier. It's calculated automatically here in Airtable, which is the weeks until the donation. We're going to get that into later. And then the cause is also populated via Zapier. And follow-ups we're going to get to at the end.
Yeah, let me back up just a little bit. Can you go back to your Zap super quick? Just
Yeah.
to walk through a little bit of what goes on. So Zapier works by two main things. One is called a trigger and one is called an action. And here, give is actually the trigger. So essentially, every time a new donation happens on the website, it triggers an API call, essentially goes over to Zapier, and Zapier goes, oh, hey, that's a new donation. And it treats that as the trigger, and it grabs all of that data. And then if you go down below to the action, then you see essentially what it does with that trigger. It takes all that information and it does this action, which is then here you can see it is creating a record, which is those rows in that table on Airtable. So that's essentially how Zapier works. And then getting all that information in is essentially everything that's included in the API that Give has, because our Zapier integration works based on our API. There's a couple of things I do want to highlight. We don't want to go into major depth about it, but for example, where it shows cause on John's table here, the coronavirus label, that actually is coming in via Google Analytics UTM parameters. Is that correct, Jonathan?
This is actually the name of the form. So
that's the form title.
In the newsletter tab, we'll get into the UTM.
I see.
But yeah, this is the name of the form, the coronavirus form.
Excellent. All right. So that all of that is just in the free plugin in our API endpoint, and gets populated there automatically. There's some additional information we'll talk about later that requires our Google Analytics add-on, but just a heads up on that. We don't need to go into big detail on that. We'll probably write up a little bit about that in the article that we do here, but just a heads up for everybody there. So
yeah, and if you want to make use of this weeks until donation, then you would also need a Zap from your opt-in app, opt-in plugin app. The plugin that would also add them into the Airtable, but there's plenty, if not basically all of them integrate with Zapier, so that's also a pretty easy and no code needed solution.
Yep, excellent. So there are other triggers that Give has, like a new donor instead of a new donation. There's also ones that are supported via recurring donations. But like Jonathan said, just being able to pipe all of this information into Airtable just really takes just one zap in Zapier, which is the new donation trigger. So that's relatively straightforward and powerful at the same time. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, let's move on to let me double check, make sure everyone feel free to just add any of your questions or thoughts or ponderings into. We have two actually sections here in the Zoom webinar here. You can use the chat to add your comments. You can also hit the Q&A and ask your questions there. Either one of those will work, and we'll be able to answer those. So go ahead and start getting those in there, and we'll be watching for it. But let's move over into talking about views and charts. I think this is getting more into the real power of what this information will do for a nonprofit organization. So can you walk us through a little bit of what you do with views and charts?
Yeah, so I felt like almost until now we were in the introduction phase. We were
Yeah.
talking about what is Airtable, how to get data in. Now let's finally get into some of that deep data and see how we can use information in Airtable to become better fundraisers. So if you remember, I said that there's these different tabs at the top, and each one of them provides uh, a lot of information. So we're going to start off here on the first tab, which is the donations tab. So this is a list of every single donation that's been made to this nonprofit. And a couple of things that you could do here is Airtable has different ways to organize this data. And by looking at different ways to organize it, you can find patterns, you can find outliers, you can find nuggets of information. So I'm going to highlight a couple of them. And the different ways that we organize them are through views. And it's a great name because you're kind of looking at the same data, but from different perspectives, different views. So something that should probably be on the forefront of a lot of fundraisers is donations by cause, and this would be available inside inside the GiveWP
Yeah.
whatchamacallit, yeah,
Our reports. Yep.
our reports, thank you. But there's some additional data here that wouldn't be in those reports.
Mm-hmm.
So here I have coronavirus, Feed the Poor, Giving Tuesday, Healing the Sick, tax deduction raffles A and B. And it shows me the amount of donations, the total donated. Here I have that same thing pulled up, but average donation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, you can see, oh, wait a second, this is really pulling in a lot more money. But look, the people who are healing the sick are far more passionate about any of our other causes, and I can see here the Giving Tuesday, whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
here I can see how engaged were these people by
Yep.
how weeks until donation. So I can see, oh, coronavirus subscribers actually donated right away, which makes sense. There's been a lot of, around that. And again, we see a similar pattern. Giving Tuesday for this nonprofit was a little bit less powerful. So maybe that's a sign that, hey, we need to focus more on Giving Tuesday, or it says, hey, we shouldn't be investing so much in our Giving Tuesday campaigns. Depends on the nonprofit. This is the amount of subscriptions that by subscriptions I mean recurring donors that it brought in. So different also levels of priority depending on the nonprofit, but we can see here, okay, coronavirus, here's something interesting. Coronavirus brought in far more recurring, which should raise an eyebrow, right?
Yes.
We all hope
It
this
raised
this
my eyebrow
pandemic,
immediately. I was like, what?
right?
So I don't want
So
to get into like you telling us details about your clients that you can't tell us, but do you know offhand of anything they did for that campaign that was significantly different that encouraged more recurring donors?
we did. That's a good question. Uh, Basically we ran a campaign saying people are out of jobs and they're not going to have their job starting again tomorrow. And we
Mm,
ran a campaign where someone can make a 3-month, a 6-month, or a 12-month recurring donation.
awesome.
So yeah, so that obviously we never saw that amount of recurring donors before.
Yeah.
But let's pretend that was not the case, right? Let's pretend that I didn't just tell you that. And what this is showing is saying, wait a second, something about our coronavirus campaign made people come recurring, which is ironic because we all hope that this coronavirus stuff is going to be over one day, and
Mm,
something like healing the sick and feeding the poor is
mm.
probably going
Not
to
going away
outlast.
soon. Yeah.
Right, unfortunately, right. So what can we glean from that coronavirus campaign? Obviously, a world pandemic, it's not like we can just call, maybe that is something. Maybe we just say, don't forget about the pandemic of healing the sick, of feeding the
Yeah.
poor, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's some good nugget of information. And then another thing you could do here is look, this is A/B testing, one of the fundamental steps to fundraising. I could see, hey, raffle B, right? The second time we ran this raffle, it didn't pull in as much money, but we got 8 recurring donors as opposed to
Yep.
0. So
Yep.
what messaging there, right? Because ultimately I don't have the tab open about projected donations on this one, but ultimately how can we copy that? How can we bring that more into
Yep.
all of our fundraising campaigns? So that's another thing.
Yep.
That's that.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Let me back up just a little bit. We do have a question
great.
from the group. They say, can you add your custom fields from GiveWP to Airtable? And I'll go ahead and answer that. That's absolutely possible. Like I mentioned, all of that stuff is ported from Zapier over into Airtable via the GiveWP API. And fortunately, whenever you have custom fields that are added to your forms, those are automatically added into what's called the donation meta. And that's all accessible over our API. So that's a little bit of the technical answer. The short answer is yes. That all is going to appear and available to you when you create that Zap. You'll see that in there. And then as soon as it's in there, then you're able to map it to whatever table you want in Airtable via that Zap as well. Do you have anything to add to that as well, Jonathan?
So not to get into this right now, but that the answer, yeah, 100% what Matt said. And not only that, every field in Airtable actually has many different ways to calculate that field. So if it's a date, if it's a number, if it's a currency, if it's a description, and based on the type of data it is, a duration, based on the type of data it is, there's going to be different options for automations and formulas and stuff like that. So here's a great example. You know, here we have, I didn't even get into this yet. Here we have the coronavirus thing. So that's a word, but here, because I have the donation as a currency field, it will automatically know, hey, wait a second, he might want to see, that's a number, he might want to see the sum, he might want to see the average, he might want to see the minimum, he might want to see the maximum, right? It has all of these things already built in because it knows that I'm dealing with a number, a currency.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Good stuff. Keep those questions coming and we'll keep answering them. Nice. So that's a bit about views. Do you have another thing you want to do about views, or do you want to move into charts?
Yeah, let's do a little more on views because I had a couple other examples already pulled in. So now let's, just to show you, here's a donor tab. And this might look overwhelming, so Airtable might take some getting used to. Sometimes the more, what's Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
with tons of data comes tons of patience, hopefully.
Right. So, you know, let's say instead of looking at in the past about your donations, you want to look at your donors, right? And you want to say, I'm going to throw out a couple of examples here. You want to say, hey, wait a second, I want more recurring donors. Let me try to find big donors, but who have not yet joined the recurring team. And maybe we'll send them a special campaign or something like that. Or I just want to see if it's worth tackling these people, if it's worth going after these people. So here I can make a filter and I could say, show me only people who have donated over $1,000, but who are not recurring. And I can see, oh, all these people all together, they've funded $236,000, you know, so that's obviously worth it, you know, and I could see all those same data points we've been discussing, what causes they've given to, how long it took them to become donors. So that's another way to, again, that perspective, looking at the same data, but from a new perspective.
Yeah,
or
that's an excellent perspective too.
Yeah, or like lapsed recent donors. Here's another like low-hanging fruit. You know, so here I made a new filter. I said, okay, someone who's not recurring, obviously, someone who's given over 5 donations, but not in the last 6 months. So either something we did turned off these people, these were big donors, 5 donations or more, or I could change that to $1,000 or more. What, you know, you can make the filter however you want. And I could say, what, you know, are these people, did they just lose interest? Did they forget about us? This is another way to take that same data, look at it from a new perspective and say, is there a missing opportunity? Is there something to be learned? And then lastly, let's say we want to open a new branch and we need $100,000 for the down payment. And so I could have someone who gave me $10 a month for 10 years, but that person might not be able to write a check today for $3,000 if that's what I'm short. So here's like another way I could say, hey, show me anyone. I don't care about their lifetime value. I want to know at one point in time, did they give a donation that was over $2,500? You know, and that's another way to to differentiate between lifetime and a one-time, because sometimes you want those lifetime people, sometimes you want those one-time people, depending on your needs, depending on your story right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another awesome
Yeah.
view.
Real quick, I want to catch folks up who are watching. We have some comments from the attendees here. I asked folks in the comments how many of you are already using Airtable, or is this the first time you've heard of it? Kirk is saying he already uses Airtable, but he's very interested in how this works. So perhaps this was something that he's already used Airtable in lots of different ways, but never thought about it in terms of donor management. So this is a new use case for him. Teresa says she's considering Airtable, but haven't had time to play with it. I feel a lot like that. It's like I've been flirting with Airtable for years and never just jumped in. Mike says his experience with Airtable is extremely limited. This is basically the first time. So we're getting some new folks interested in Airtable today. So that's great to hear. So keep it coming,
Okay.
Jonathan. We love it.
All right, so I'm going to do one more thing on views, which might be step 2 for some organizations, but something that's really important. And as you really try to focus on your digital growing and expanding your digital fundraising through technology and through optimization, something that is just super, super critical. So one of the things Matt alluded to earlier with the Zap is there's a Google Analytics extension.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things it does is it will pull your UTM parameters into the donation. And if you're unclear about what UTM parameters are, they're basically things you can tell Google Analytics about the donation, and therefore Google Analytics can organize it accordingly. So we're not really going to get into what UTMs are, but you're going to be able to see one of the end results. And if you're not using UTMs, hopefully this will inspire you to use
Absolutely.
UTMs.
Another way to think about it is it tells Google Analytics what to do with that traffic, essentially. So traffic is coming to your website. If that traffic has UTM parameters on it, then Google will say, oh, okay, you're calling this an email campaign. Okay, I'll categorize it as such. Oh, and you're saying that it has this kind of content. Okay, I'll add that content to this traffic. And then in analytics, you're able to analyze that traffic with those labels, essentially. So, and like Jonathan said, those UTMs are then saved as donation meta when the donor donates. They come to your site via that link that has those UTM parameters on it, and then because they landed on a page that has a form on it and you have the Google Analytics add-on, that information is stored in the donation meta. And then because it's in the donation meta, it's accessible via Zapier to port into Airtable, just like this.
Yes. So one of the things that Matt just said was it can track whether something's a newsletter and the content of that newsletter. So what I have here is an example of different newsletters. So some organizations send out a weekly, some send out a monthly. For all I know, some send out daily newsletters. And generally, these are one of the most successful ways to raise funds on an ongoing basis. So what I pulled in here was every time that Zap triggers, it tells Airtable which newsletter this is from. And because of that, I'm able to create a new table based on newsletters. And I can look at all my same data points, but now organized by newsletters. So these are subject lines. And you can kind of organize this however you would like. And I also remove the subject lines, and these are just random nonsense subject lines that I copied off.
I gotta say, some of these subject lines are pretty fun, I have to say.
Yeah. So I think I went to HubSpot.com and said, what are the 100 best subject lines? And then I copied and pasted some of these in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Witches be crazy, and so is this box. That's a good one.
Yeah. Buy one, get one free, or else.
Or else. Also, I'm amazed how well if you scroll up, how well the one that says "Don't open this email" did. Look at those donations.
Yeah.
Nice. Anyway.
Yeah. So I wish nonprofits, it was as easy to come up with such crazy subject lines. Maybe we could do a whole webinar on that, because some crazy numbers around that also. But in the meantime, while we're focused on Airtable, this is something so many nonprofits invest crazy amounts of time into their newsletters, and they can look at it week by week, and they could say, oh, this week we pulled in this much, and it was pretty much from that newsletter because that's what we sent out that week.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole, first of all, I've seen that that's not always true. I've seen people make donations from newsletters 8 months ago. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen often, but it
Totally.
does happen.
Yeah.
But that's not even the important part. The important part is trying to to dive deeper into that. And what does that mean? So there's obviously the top line items like total income, amount of donations, the average donation. I'm going to get to theme in a second. The amount of recurring, something that is rarely looked at. You know, this email, important weather advisory, brought in $55,000. But if this is a cool feature. If I sort by recurring, I can see this was double the amount of recurring than our next best email, you know, and then there were two good ones, and then it drops off drastically. So what in these three emails, and the top one in particular,
Mm-hmm.
spoke to people and made them become recurring?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing in terms of organizing and trying to glean data is I thought there's different types of newsletters. Some of them focus on donors, which is pretty much what you usually want to be focusing on, right? Sometimes it's focusing on the need, and sometimes it's a focus on the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I went here and I labeled each one of these, and I looked through the, you know, our 27 best newsletters, and I organized them. And now that I have them organized, look what I can do. I can look at them by theme, and I can say,
Mm-hmm.
you know, let me collapse these. I can say, oh, when I focus on donors, you know, these aren't totally evenly split because it's 10, 10, and 7 newsletters. So let's pretend that third one is 10.
Mm-hmm.
And that way I know I'm looking at the same amount of newsletters. But look, even without that, focusing on the donor brings in about twice as much, more than twice as much as focusing on the need. And the
Mm-hmm.
average donation is triple. And this might be the opposite for your organization. And you would never know if you weren't able to organize and then sort in such a simple and accurate way.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another awesome one. I want to look at, well, I kind of already spoke about this. I want to look at newsletters that brought in 5 or more recurring donations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with only 27, it's not so hard to eye those, but if you have 300 newsletters, you can pull up your 20 best newsletters in terms of recurring donations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's enough for views.
Yeah.
That's quite, I think that we went through about 10 examples
Yeah.
of deep
It's
data
definitely a
points
lot to
that,
chew on. Like, I
right.
think I'm hoping folks are definitely going to come back and hit the rewind button and watch it a couple times. But let's talk a little bit about charts as well, because what you were showing me the other day is that Airtable also has some really powerful charts that are just kind of automated and powerful.
Right. So a lot of times you log into donor CRMs, and I'm not trying to criticize those, but I've had clients come to me with their donor CRMs, and they show me these, you know, beautiful charts, and a lot of times they kind of cover up the ability to really, again, dive deep into looking for nuances. So what's amazing about Airtable is that however you organize the views and your tables that we just spoke about, that automatically correlates to how your dashboards and your charts and your graphs are created. So any tabular data, and tabular data means, you know, columns and rows, what we've been looking up until now, it
Yeah.
can then take and convert into a visual experience. So here's a couple of highlights that I'm not going to spend too much time on because they're visual, because they should be kind of intuitive and pretty quick. This is probably the number one thing every nonprofit wants to see
Yeah.
when they start looking at data. How many donations have we gotten month over month? And I actually adjusted some of the dates here so you could see, like, oh my gosh. So we spiked huge when coronavirus hit, and we've
Mm-hmm.
clearly been going down. You know, so have we been going down more than expected, less than expected, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's daily or weekly by the last, this is weekly, by the last 90 days. So
Mm-hmm.
that's looking more at our recent campaigns. This is a fun one, which uses the the Google Maps API, you can, and I also, for the point of this illustration and not to ramp up my Google Maps API bill, I just plotted a couple of these in the United States. It can take addresses and create a map, a visual map out of them. And yeah, actually all of these are interactive. So I can actually click on these and it'll show me the donation.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is really cool. Show me the person and who it is. And if I want to reach out, I'm from Chicago. If I want to reach out to people in Chicago, I could be like, oh, here's a donation from Peoria. And these also, if I click on any one of these, it will pull up all the donations that went into generating that bar.
Yeah.
Here's another one. I've had a lot of clients who have screamed, we need more recurring, we need more recurring, we need more recurring. And then I say back to them, well, how many right now of your donations are from recurring and how many not? And they have no idea. And I said, well, then how are you so obsessed with recurring without really knowing the numbers behind it? So that's what this is. And this is, 22% of our income is of our donations. I don't know if income's the right word, is from monthly, and 77 are not. And then I could go ahead and duplicate this and build in those. This one actually might be based on expected donations based on recurring. I believe it is. So this is a great pie chart. If we look at, let's see what's in this one. I think these are just highlights. Let's actually skip this one. Oh, you know what? Here's a very important number that organizations are always looking. How many lapse donors do we have?
Yep.
You know, is this going up or down? Let's look at cause. So these are cool charts because again, it might be easier to look at things when they're like this, but this is a pie chart of how much each cause is brought in. This is a bar chart. And again, based on the views, you could do month over month, anything like that. I'm trying to show as many examples as possible so people can inspire for their own.
I mean, this kind of stuff for me too is like, this is material that you want to bring to your next board meeting. Like,
yeah.
You want to show folks, this is what's performing the best, and this is where we're funded by at the moment, and this is where we need to improve. Like, all of these make it very, very easy to make a compelling case for certain causes.
Yeah, and I'll tell you from experience, if any of you are out there are marketers or part of the marketing team on your organization, a lot of times the people you're presenting your numbers to are not number people, and that is a challenge. So this is a great way for someone who's not a numbers person to understand your information. So like we just went on a chart here where I was showing you themes. And someone might look at this and be like, even this much is overwhelming, but I show them this pie chart. Oh, I can see when we focus on donors, it pulls in about half, and then about the remaining is 25%, 25%, you know, and your newsletter, it's all the same data, which is why I'm moving through it pretty quickly. But here's a bar chart of those newsletters that brought in 5 or more recurring donors.
We actually have 2 questions that came through.
Okay.
They're both good questions. So first one is Teresa asks, is it easy to export these graphs? So, I mean, you could definitely do a screenshot of them, but is there an export feature for them?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the one thing for sure that you could do is embed them on a website. So Airtable is clearly like working on this because I've seen them add to it recently. But like here they have a share block and all tables in the space. So I can go ahead and click share block. Block, it means chart. And then I can either send someone a link and it just, let's actually make sure this does what I'm thinking it does. Yes, this sends them a link of that one block, whether it's a pie chart, a number, or whatever. And then what I do for my clients is I'll grab the embed code, and then I'll grab this and I'll make them a page on their website, like in the back end, or you could do different things like that. And then I would embed a whole bunch of charts. So they have this ongoing live dashboard where they never have to log into Airtable. They don't have to know what Airtable is. In terms of like exporting a non-dynamic version, I believe your best option would be something like taking a screenshot. I can't think of another option off the top of my head, but yeah, the main point of these is that it's dynamic. As donations come in, they get updated. So
Yeah.
I don't know, like if you want to turn it into PDF, you'd probably be going with screenshots. Good
Yeah.
question.
So second question that came in is, and I'll probably answer this one. There are times when Alan asks this. There are times when we have to make a correction to a GiveWP donation record. Would that automatically transfer to Airtable and update the data there when we save the transaction in Give, or does that require some special Zapier triggers? You will need to update that in Airtable separately because we talked earlier about the different triggers. And currently there is only a new donation trigger. There's not a donation was updated trigger. So if you do change something on the Give side, you're going to need to go and change it manually on the Airtable side as well. Luckily, the way Jonathan is showing all of this is all of the donations are going one at a time into this one table. And so if you update it in that one place, all the other places within Airtable that references that row or that donation in that row, they're all going to be updated automatically because it's kind of like this is the one source of truth within this table. So that's a good thing. But you will have to update them manually in both places for this purpose.
Right, and let me actually demonstrate that because we didn't really talk so much about the linking, and that's such a great question to bring out that point. So let's say here donation number 7963. It was made by Mr. Donor 2156, and that was for $18. And let's say if I open up 2156, right, and just for simplicity, let's go over to donors and find him. And I'll use search here, 2156. And there he is. So I can see here his total, like his largest donation was $36. And let's find his total. Total is $37.93. So, well, hold on.
Actually, no, it's 110.40, it looks like. 2156.
Yeah, thanks. That makes more sense. That makes more sense. So now let's say I go in and you might think, oh, I have to update it up everywhere. So if I go ahead and update this just to bring out the point, let's say I make it $1,018. Okay, now, yeah. So now, first of all, you could see my projected total just automatically increased, basically instantly. And now when I go to my donor, 2156, I can see his largest donation has been updated instantly, and his total amount donated has been updated instantly. So you really only have to change one data point, and it automatically recalculates everything across your entire database and across your entire Airtable, and that includes these charts.
Yeah.
So that's a great question, and that's how that works.
Excellent. Well, we have one last item we want to wrap up with. So we're going to move into the last point. And if you have additional questions or thoughts or feelings, hopes, dreams, aspirations, type them into that comment box and we'll address them for sure. But Jonathan, what you showed me last week is a really awesome way in which you're managing donor follow-ups essentially within Airtable as well. So can you show us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so kind of what we've been speaking about is about data-driven decisions, and this is now we're talking about taking the next step. So taking the next step in terms of, let's say we went through maybe 10 aha moments over the last 20 minutes that you might have found in your donation data. So sometimes it's like a change in focus on strategy, change in focus on campaigns, change in focus on automations, whatever. But sometimes there are those VIP donors that, or not even necessarily VIP, but people that I want to take action based on this. So it's either I want to contact this donor, or even this donation gave me a insight, gave me an idea, or this chart or whatever. So everything in Airtable can be followed up on, and it has some amazing calendar integrations. So I created an additional field here called follow-ups, and this is on here on donations. It's here on donors. Here at the end. I think it's on newsletters. I might have it hidden. Yeah, I have it hidden here. And what this is if I'm looking at any point in my Airtable and I say, you know what, let's say something about that newsletter. Okay, let's go back to that newsletter that brought in 28 recurring donations. I want to follow up on this. I got to talk to my team about this. So what I do is I go in here to my follow-ups tab and I click on my little plus sign and I click on add new record. And this is going to open up a form for me. And so I'm going to make this a to-do. This dropdown can be anything you want. I'm going to make this a to-do. I'm going to say this is super important, and I'm going to write, we got to do this. You know, and let's say I'm going to assign it to Jonathan. If you use something like Asana, that might look familiar. So like now Jonathan is going to get a notification that this was assigned to him. And then there's some automatically filled in fields, like when was this created? When was this last edited? Airtable does that all automatically. And I'm going to give this a deadline. We got to get on this. I'm marking it for today. Okay. And now that I've done that, so, 1 second. So now I'm going to go over here to my follow-ups tab. Okay, and I didn't finish. This was kind of a bad example.
Yeah,
what?
Donor right there, that bottom one.
Yeah. So I should have done this with a donor, a donation, but whatever. That let's say it was donor number 7936 that we just added. But you can see here what I just added shows up automatically in my follow-ups tab. So it's a to-do. I can see it's important. You know, I can see any notes that the person who created it, what they wrote in, who it's assigned to, and those other things. And what this lets me do is it lets me keep on top of my team. So I could look at a view called Jonathan's tasks due this week. And there it is because it was assigned to Jonathan and it's due today. Or I can just look up at things that I need to follow up on in their kind of categorized order, to-dos versus in progress versus done. And you can also make this a Kanban, whatever, thing if you're used to that, like Trello. And when I drag it in, it updates across, you know, the other stuff, just like we've spoken about. And what's the most powerful is the calendar view, because this maps it out on a calendar, and that lets you do this. It lets you do you create a shareable view, a shareable link. Now, instead of just sharing the calendar with someone, which now they got another thing that they have to check and whatever, you can actually create a subscription link. And if you use Google Calendar, Outlook, or things like this, you could take this, and now anytime inside of Airtable that you create a to-do for one of your team members, it can show up on their Google Calendar. So that's another really awesome feature, or your own. You know, if you're saying, I don't want to forget about that newsletter, I'm going to make a meeting about it for, you know, Friday the 12th or whatever it is. So, so that way you can do it all in Airtable and it's automatically synced across into your calendar.
Yeah.
If you use something like Asana, you could create a Zap. Anytime something gets into that specific view, it creates an Asana task. I'm not going to get into that right now, but that's another thing. Yeah.
We got a question here. Does it create alerts for those events in any way?
So it can create email alerts. So this is brand new. I haven't even seen it on Airtable's blog yet. Maybe I missed it, but they recently announced another thing called automations. And what you could do here is you could say let me delete this one. Let's do add action. So I could do I'm sorry. Create a new automation. That's what I wanted. So I'm going to call this alert. And what I'm going to do is when a record enters a view, right? And that means it enters, I'm going to do the follow-ups, and it's going into the Jonathan's tasks. Let's do Jonathan tasks due this week. So then I can do add action, and I could do send an email. It also has built-in send a Slack message or a Teams message. For the send an email, you do need to integrate it with a SendGrid account. So not particularly hard to do, like a 10-minute setup, but that way, and then that email comes in through your SendGrid. But you can have it, and I think by the time some people watch this list might be longer. They created this and added it to Airtable within the last like 2 weeks or something. Or if you're more technical inclined, it can run JavaScript, which opens up just
Tons
unlimited,
of
like
opportunity.
scary almost how much it can do then. But not talking about that now. So yes, it can either send a notification to Slack, to Teams, it can send an email via SendGrid, or it can really trigger really any Zap as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
So there you go.
That's excellent. Wow. I did not know about that at all. Not even the calendar view or all of these things. This is really, they've really come a long way. Airtable seems to be like iterating a lot.
Yeah, I don't. They've done some things stylistically. They've added new features. There's people are out there who do know Airtable and might have found it limiting. They recently introduced a button field where
Mm,
if you're looking at something, you can actually trigger a webhook
mm,
directly from clicking a button
wow.
inside of Airtable. So it's not letting me do it because I'm not putting in a webhook here,
Yeah.
uh, but there's to me it looks like they're only expanding. Sky's the limits.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Wow. I think that's it for what we have today, folks. We're going to be following up with an article on our website there, and I do want to do a quick announcement that Jonathan has a very, very generous offer. So we're going to put this on our website. But Jonathan, do you want to tell folks what you're offering?
Yeah, so thank you, Matt. Some of you hopefully found this eye-opening, inspiring, and I wouldn't be surprised if all of you also found it daunting and overwhelming. So even people who've used Airtable. So there is a lot going on in everything I just showed you, and I wouldn't want anyone to walk away saying, "Wow, that looks awesome," but I'm not capable of doing that. So there's going to be a follow up. I don't know about webinar or private whatever thing, totally free, 100% free. Where instead of just doing highlights and talking and Q&A and stuff like that, we're going to be doing step by step, and we're going to take a give form, we're going to take a Zap, and we're going to take an Airtable base, and I'm going to walk you through literally step by step with no step skipped, how to create the Zap, how to create formulas, views, and tables inside of Airtable. And by the end of the 1 hour, you might not have all the features that we discussed, but you'll have a lot of them, and you'll have enough of a knowledge base to start thinking about what you might want to add and how you could research and start building that inside of your Airtable base.
Excellent. That's awesome, Jonathan. Thank you so much for offering that to all of our Give users out there. Folks, watch our blog. We'll be updating that article within the next 24 hours, and there will be a contact form there for how you could get in touch with Jonathan about that follow-up webinar. So watch for that. And if you have other thoughts or ideas about what you'd love to see us do on Give Live, then reach out in all the millions of places where we are at, like Twitter and Facebook and email and blog, and we're everywhere we try to be. So thank you so much and have a good day. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Matt.
Absolutely.